I always recommend to students that they learn about gray matter of the spinal cord before they learn about the white matter. So, you know, hit the white matter first. And this is because, in general, gray matter is concerned with linking together sensory input and motor output. Um, Gray matter keeps the job simple in doing that by providing areas where neurons can synapse. Spinal white matter, it's a little bit more complicated because it's about sending that input to the brain or sending that input from the brain. Therefore, white matter forces you to envision the entire spinal column, whereas gray matter, we can just focus right here on just this transverse example here. The distinction between white matter and gray matter very simply is the presence of myelin, right? White matter is myelinated axons. Gray matter contains either cell bodies of neurons or unmyelinated axons. I guess it can contain both of them. It doesn't have to contain one or the other, but it can contain both. Gray matter of the spinal cord provides an area where neurons synapse. So we have axon terminals that are releasing neurotransmitters, and we have dendrites of cell bodies that are responding to those neurotransmitters. And I here have drawn a simple reflex arc on the right side, right? This is the right side of this transverse section of probably a lumbar section. So I have a unipolar sensory neuron here with its cell body in the dorsal root ganglion. I have the unipolar sensory neuron coming in the dorsal ramus, going through the dorsal root ganglion, going through the dorsal root, and then coming into the gray matter to synapse with another neuron. This other neuron is a multipolar neuron, motor, and it's going to leave through the ventral root. It's going to pass through the spinal nerve. That's just this little section right here. And then it's going to branch off and leave through the dorsal ramus, and it's going to go to a plexus. Let's start by just designating some very simple anatomical terms of gray matter. The points of the gray matter on this transverse section of the spinal cord, those points are called horns. And therefore, this is the dorsal horn. This here is the lateral horn. And this here, of course, is the ventral horn. You can see these horns on this microscopic picture. There's the dorsal, the lateral's right there, and I just know that because I know that. And then here is the ventral. I also wanted to point out that on this picture, you can see the meninges. They commonly do detach. And, oh, look at that. There's a dorsal root ganglion also on this picture. Good picture. So this is where it gets difficult to discuss gray matter without talking a little bit about white matter. But let's take a look over at the right-hand side of this picture, which shows you two motor pathways. Each contains two neurons, and both of the neurons lead to, well, one of the neurons is going to lead to a neuromuscular junction, so skeletal muscle, and the other neuron, let's say that it leads to visceral tissue. Right, so you see that the green neurons all have a cell body that's located in the brain, and then it descends the spinal cord, but then it synapses with another neuron. And where it synapses is in gray matter. So if a multipolar neuron is outgoing and sending information to somatic tissues, that multipolar neuron will originate right here, and it will go to somatic tissues. If a multipolar neuron is outgoing and it is carrying information to visceral tissues, it will start about here. and then it will travel out and send information to visceral tissues. Okay, let's just make 2 circles here because we've made 2 areas of gray matter. Let's do sensory as well. So if I have incoming sensory information that is from a visceral organ, sorry, let's do that here. From a visceral organ, here's my unipolar neuron, it will synapse right here. If I have information coming in from a unipolar neuron that's coming from skeletal muscle, then it will synapse right here. So let's be specific again that we've defined the dorsal horn and then a little bit anterior of the dorsal horn, right? So we have 2 other circles like that. So what this sets up is it sets up synapsing spaces that are very specific. This is for sensory somatic. This is where sensory somatic neurons would synapse. This is where sensory visceral neurons would synapse. Right? This is where motor somatic to the neuromuscular junction would synapse. And this is where motor visceral. And I had a student once make this observation. They said, oh, visceral on the inside, somatic on the outside. And I was like, you are correct, actually. And then what we know also is that we have learned to associate sensory with the dorsal side of the brain and spinal cord, and motor with the ventral side of the brain and spinal cord. So again, the horns, the gray matter, these are areas where certain types of neurons synapse and carry certain types of information in these 4 categories here.